Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another historical humans heritage. And on today's episode, we are talking about the stone town of Zanzibar, which is a fine example of the Swahili coastal tradition in Eastern Africa. But it's quite
Yep.
an interesting one, and we don't tend to talk about Africa all that frequently. So here we are.
Yeah. No. Yep. One of the very fun things about the Stone Town here is that it is a multicultural site to its fullest. It combines elements of cultures from Africa, Arabia, India, and Europe. So this is a real melting pot of effectively half the globe uh, coming together to make this town. Uh, The Stone Town itself is located on a promontory jutting out of an island that points into the Indian Ocean. And it was originally a Swahili trading town. And to this day, it remains an outstanding example of that tradition. Um, this type of town is would typically have been developed on the coast of East Africa, like Zanzibar was, and then would have expanded as it came into contact with other cultures, uh, sort of bringing in the concepts from those cultures that worked or were deemed beautiful by the people there, and more or less adding the uniqueness from other places to it until it had a little bit of everybody.
Yeah, you can
Uh,
see a lot of borrowing of styles, a lot of borrowing of architecture, but also in a way that makes it very culturally unique, very uniquely identifiable with Swahili culture. And this is
yeah,
now within Tanzania, so no longer Zanzibar, but you could see, as much as I like to highlight it in the pictures, there's one of the Arabic arch with the pointed top, you know. I love pointing that out because that's prominent on a lot of Indian architecture as well. These coastal towns really do get that external influence from the traders and from people that travel. And these coastal towns are such interesting blends of these cultures and of these people. But then they also tend to evolve and grow these personalities all their own. I mean, look at how
they,
intricate some of these carvings are, some of these designs. It truly is a work of masterpiece. And one of the things that I definitely notice a lot of here is the defensive fortifications.
yeah,
Another side
yeah,
effect of living on the coast, eh?
yeah. One of the fun things about those defensive fortifications is one of the ones that are included in the World Heritage Site is what's called the Old Fort, which is a fortress someone built out of a Portuguese church. Uh, it's a church converted into a military base, which is both funny and beautiful. There's actually a number of other key buildings listed here. There is the ceremonial palace built by Sultan Bargash. There is uh, the Christ Church Anglican Cathedral, which commemorates David Livingstone's abolition of the slave trade. It was built over the site of the last slave market in Zanzibar.
Wow, that's quite prophetic.
Um, Yeah, you can see right here from just a few things listed that there is a habit of taking something a culture gave you, and then whenever that culture changes its relationship with you, building into that same spot with the new thing.
Yeah, to replace it and to override it.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
the
yeah.
other cool thing, too, is they also have Persian baths there. They have the Royal
Oh,
Cemetery. Um, there's just a lot of interesting blends between African and Asian cultures, influences, and the Stone Town is also marked by being the site where slave trading was finally terminated. So it's kind of this
yeah,
end point too with trading.
yeah. It is. It is the day that that form of shall we say, economics finally died. This is the hill it died on, and this is where we killed it as a
It,
human collective.
it's kind of an interesting thing because we're looking at it now in this positive light of, yeah, it's the place where slavery died, but then in reality it's also the last bastion of slavery. So
Yeah.
it's like, but David Livingston, who you mentioned, spent a lot of time in Zanzibar and in the Stone City, and worked very heavily in the suppression and eventual abolition from the inside. I mean, there are
Mhm.
institutions fighting for it beyond, especially in Brazil and the U.S., but to see it finally end here is a good sign. And a lot of the structures and everything here are in pretty good condition, but some of them are very vulnerable to deterioration, especially being so close to the sea and especially with urbanization and inappropriate developments that are happening.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the, yeah. And going back to the point with like David Livingston,
Yeah,
one of the three criterion that UNESCO gives to the Stone City as to why it is important is the fact that it was a major slave port, and that it was the slave port from which David Livingston and a number of abolitionists operated out of for the purposes of finally ending the institution. So this was a major stronghold for the institution, but it was also the capital of the movement that finally killed it.
yeah.
So it's it's on both sides of the coin in all its glory and shame that comes with that. Uh, and that makes it unique in history because a lot of places really are on one side or the other.
And
Rarely is a place both.
that also kind of ties into some of the importance with the city and some of its authenticity. So, with the exception of the marketplaces, we'll refer to them as,
Yeah,
most of the other buildings have maintained their traditional usage and have remained in use pretty much for continuity. Like they never stopped; they just continued.
yeah, yeah. Because that speaks to I think just the concept of how land is used in Zanzibar, almost of just like this was the buildings put here by your culture. If your culture changes, the purpose of that building changes with you. We don't add a different building or tear down the building. It keeps going as it was.
But that's also one of the things that we should talk about with this is with the protection and with the current state of things, because there's quite a number of laws and acts in place to protect it, like the Ancient Monuments Act, the Town and Country Planning Act, this um, God, there's another one in there. They're under
Yeah,
the Development Act of 1994. However, even under these protections, the site is still extremely vulnerable and under direct threat from inappropriate construction, is what they're referring to it as. But it's bypassing these restrictions. It's bypassing these laws with no regard for them.
yeah. I, yeah, I believe the phrase comes up later on in the UNESCO page is tourist development,
Hmm.
which has been putting pressure on the town since 1990. Uh, Effectively, there's there's an absence of policies on heritage promotion, on what you can and cannot do to promote the site, what regulates tourism at the site. There's all these protections for the buildings themselves, but nothing regulating the people going in and out of the city, all the things you need in infrastructure for thousands of people to travel to and from Zanzibar every year. There's nothing on what can and can't be done with that. And that is threatening to encroach and engulf the historic center here.
It's always such a double edged sword because people very much like to think that historic sites should be tourist and should be there for educational purposes, which there's a lot of validity in that, 100%.
Yeah,
But there is this crux, this high point that it be no longer becomes sustainable and can actually become threatening to it, especially with the minds of people who are monetarily oriented. You know, if you're
yeah,
specifically trying to make a buck and you don't care about what corners you cut or overloading the system, then you're not being a good steward to the culture. You're not being a good steward. It's just it's a hard thing to face, but I think we've lamented on that a little too long
Yeah,
here. I think
yeah.
it's a good point for us to wrap up and call it a day.
The spiral of the tourism funds the site educates the tourists, isn't always the most beneficial cycle, even if, people should have access to things of outstanding universal value, like the stone city of Zanzibar. It's the unanswerable question that archaeologists and anthropologists and everyone in between is debating.
Conservationist, preservationist, all the ists.
Politicians.
Yeah. But thank you guys for watching. We'll see you in the next one.